Hey there, welcome to Lesson 1, What is a Podcast? Here's what you'll discover in this lesson. You'll discover what podcasts are and are not. You'll learn about the history of podcasts. And you'll get an overview of how podcasts work, so that way you know exactly what this great survival and preparedness tool is and how it can benefit you when it comes to your overall preparedness. Receiving quality information is crucial for survival and preparedness. That's because without reliable information, our awareness of our current situation and possible future situations is at best questionable. And as a result of having questionable information, so too is our ability to address the goals of preparedness questionable, which are to ensure our survival and minimize our unwanted struggle. When it comes to gathering information, nothing has revolutionized the process like the advent of the internet. With that in mind, the internet has carved out many inroads onto the information superhighway. The fact is that in today's world, as long as a person has access to the internet, they have access to most of the digital information ever created. Gone are the days of information research taking the shape of a few worn-out paragraphs in a well-worn-out encyclopedia. Instead, we're now in the days of having instantaneous access to more information than ever, and with a couple of simple keystrokes and a click of a button, we can pretty much find any information that we want or need. Our modern reality is that the answers to many of our questions, information about the latest trends, and updates on the current events are pretty much available to anyone, anywhere, at any time. The fact is that there are over 1.7 billion websites worldwide which have information that we may need or want to look into. And as of January 2021, there were over 4.6 billion active internet users worldwide exchanging information. And the number one resource for looking up information, Google, processes over 3.5 billion searches per day. And that doesn't mean you're going to use Google, because there are more anonymous sources like DuckDuckGo, and it still doesn't change the fact that there are billions of searches happening every day for information that people both want and need. With that, one method of information uptake that has proven useful and enjoyable, and which unfortunately still confounds some preppers, is that of podcasts. I say unfortunately because podcasts are so easy to learn to use and are such a great preparedness tool that preppers who don't have the ability and knowledge and understanding to use them are at a definitely distinct disadvantage when compared to those who do understand how to use podcasts. The fact is, podcasts have become a popular pastime for many people, including podcast creators and listeners alike. Moreover, podcasts have also become a popular way to gather information, and that only makes sense since it's so much easier to figure out how to use a podcast than it is, for example, to get a ham radio license. Merriam-Webster defines a podcast as music or talk shows that a creator produces in digital format for automatic, on-demand download over the internet. More simply stated, a podcast is like a radio show, except it's on the internet. And unlike listening to a show through your radio, you can save podcast episodes and listen to them over and over again whenever you like. Is there an episode on planning or bugging out that you really like? No problem. Save the downloaded episode in your own personal preparedness library of podcasts, and it's yours to listen to whenever you like for as long as you'd like. The two, podcasts and radio, have enough similarities that some people refer to podcasts as free on-demand internet radio shows. And if that helps you to better understand what a podcast is, then that's great. The term podcast is a merging of the word pod and broadcast, with pod referring to the original iPod devices that many use to listen to their podcasts. And the inclusion of pod in the name pays homage to the fact that podcasts have their origins in and connection with the first Apple iPods. When it comes to defining a podcast is typically an internet talk program that is recorded as a digital audio file, which is then made available for download over the web. In other words, a podcast is when someone like me records a show. Then, after recording the show, I upload it to the internet as a digital audio file where a listener like you can listen to it whenever you have the time. Some shows use a structured format, while others are free-flowing and conversational. A structured format is similar to mainstream media shows that are scripted and follow a set structure. Unscripted shows, on the other hand, follow the conversation wherever it leads. In general, regardless of the structure of the show, the goal of podcasters is to bring value to the listeners. And, after all, as a listener, You are exchanging one of your most valuable resources, which is your time, to get the information that a podcaster like myself puts out. In other words, you're giving up your time that can be spent doing other things and listening to other podcasts to listen to me and what I have to say. One of the great things about podcasts is that they can focus on any subject, niche, or segment of society imaginable. Pretty much, if someone has a question or a topic of discussion that you're interested in, then there's a podcast episode to fit your interests and needs. Do you want to learn about prepping, SHTF events, self-reliance, or other preparedness-related topics? Well, there's probably one or more episodes housed on one or more podcasts talking about exactly what you're interested in. Even better is the fact that since there are a number of people podcasting on similar topics, you can do a deep dive into gathering information from various perspectives that you can then use to form whatever works best for your needs. Take a little bit from one and a little bit from another and throw them all in your toolbox, and you'll have your version of preparedness that much more ready to go. Now that we've talked about what a podcast is, let's talk about what a podcast isn't. First, podcasts are not videos. Videos such as those you find on YouTube, Rumble, etc. are not a podcast. Podcasts are audio only. With that, some creators, including myself, will often record our shows in video format and post those videos for people to watch online. We then take the audio from those shows and upload it to the internet for listening to as an audio-only podcast episode. Again, to reiterate, podcasts are audio only, even if there is a video version available somewhere else. For example, Dale Goodwin and I on the Survival Preppers YouTube channel do live streams and record videos that we post on our YouTube channel. And we take the audio from some of those shows and we upload it for a downloadable podcast under the Survival Preppers podcast. So you can watch us on YouTube, and if you're not into watching on YouTube or you want to listen to a podcast episode, you can listen to us on the Survival Preppers podcast. Podcasts are not live streams. Some shows use the internet to broadcast their content live, like I said, with Dale and I doing YouTube live streams. However, this type of broadcast is known as a live stream, which is similar to a live radio show. And while live streams are often turned into podcast episodes, a podcast is always a pre-recorded and uploaded show. Now let's cover the history of podcasts. When it comes to the history of podcasts, podcasting was initially developed in 2004 by Adam Curry, a former MTV video jockey or VJ. Adam, who still podcasts today with his No Agenda podcast, partnered with software developer Dave Weiner to release the first iteration of what would eventually become a podcast. Podcasting was born when Curry wrote the code for his iPodder program, which allowed the automatic download of internet radio broadcasts to Adam's personal iPod. Following Adam's success, developers then took the early iPodder concept, ran with it, and podcasting was born. Currently, there isn't any government regulation when it comes to podcasts. Anyone can exercise their freedom of speech by releasing a podcast on any topic they choose. While television and radio, though, must meet strict license requirements to broadcast, podcasts do not. This means that when it comes to podcasts, the host is free to do as he or she pleases. In turn, the wide open programming lets listeners pick and choose the shows that they find most appealing. And while podcasters are not subject to the FCC, the Federal Communication Commission's regulations, they are subject to universal copyright laws and other regulations. In other words, when it comes to podcasting, while hosts are relatively free, there are still laws that they must comply with. More and more, though, large corporations are getting into the podcasting business and the podcasting world. However, while there are big corporations starting to get into podcasts, most podcasts are created by regular people like myself, like many of the people you see in the preparedness community, in their home studios, their kitchens, their closets, and wherever else they can find to create a decent sounding show. And finally, because podcasts don't rely on ratings as mainstream media does, the topics discussed can be more free and open without outside influence. Now, one of the greatest advantages of podcasts is that you control the podcast. And when it comes to podcasts, there's a flow to both the way a podcaster records and publishes a show and how a listener like you gets an episode and listens to it. What makes podcasts better than traditional information platforms, in my opinion, is that you and I, as the listener, control the show. Once I publish an episode on the internet, it's your decision if you listen to it now, later, all at once, in pieces, or over and over again. And as I said earlier, maybe you add it to your personal preparedness audio library of podcast episodes that you can listen to whenever you want, as long as you have power to your device. In the end, it's you who controls the podcast experience, and in so doing, the information you get, where you get it from, and when you get it. Ultimately, if you don't like the show, just tap the off button and you'll be on your way to the next listening choice or whatever it is that you want to do. When it comes to listening to the shows that you want, you can do so through the internet by going to a podcast website, which I'll explain later, and through podcasting apps. When listening through the app, you do so by first clicking on whatever podcasting app you like best. And when it comes to apps, you can think of apps as something similar to the dial on a radio, which allows you to tune in to whatever station you like. However, in the case of podcasts, the stations you choose are the podcast shows, such as Mine for Survival and others that you want to listen to. Once you choose a show, your podcast app then automatically links to the computer servers where the podcast audio files are housed. Unlike radio, however, once your podcast app is linked up with the show you want to listen to, there are two ways to listen to it. The first way, direct streaming, is similar to how a radio pulls in a show through radio waves. With streaming, though, your show is transmitted from the podcast servers to your device for immediate and direct listening. In other words, you listen to the show immediately as your device receives the podcast's audio data. This form of listening does not permanently store the podcast audio file on your device, and depending on the quality of your internet connection, can sometimes sound choppy as your device works to keep up with the audio data flow. You need a certain amount of download speed available in order to make the stream go uninterrupted. If the stream becomes interrupted due to not having enough speed, it'll buffer for a few seconds. In other words, it'll store up a bit of audio and then play it to you until the stream is interrupted again or finishes up with the podcast. The second way of listening to a show is by downloading the show through your podcast app to your device for playing then or at a later time. And because downloading stores all of a show on your device, there should be no choppiness when listening to it after the downloading is complete. You can think of downloading as recording a show so you have it available to you all the time and without interruption. Finally, you also have the option of simultaneously streaming and downloading a show to your device. While this method may still sound choppy if your internet connection is poor, it allows you to listen to the show later without the choppiness once the download is complete. Another advantage of podcasts is that you have the option of subscribing or following free of charge to the shows you like. Following a podcast is similar to setting your TV's DVR to record shows you like, regardless of whether you watch them when they are broadcast or not. Once subscribed, the show will notify you and automatically download every new episode as it is released. That way, just as you're able to watch a DVR show after it's broadcast, you're able to listen to the podcast likewise after it's released. That's an important feature of podcasts because while today's apps let you automatically download new episodes, there was a time when the ability to do so wasn't a thing. Instead, listeners had to manually complete a several-step process to download and access new episodes. Fortunately for all involved, the process of listening to podcasts is now usually automatic and can be instantaneous depending on the choices you make in your app settings. It's also good to know that if you stop listening to a particular show, your device will not continue to download shows until its memory is full. Instead, after a small number of shows go unlistened to, the app will typically put downloading any new episodes on hold. Those on hold episodes will remain that way until you, the show subscriber, tells the app to resume downloading the episodes again. So, if you have a show that you like to listen to and you're downloading it, and then for whatever reason you get too busy or you don't have time to listen to the show, the app will put downloading of those shows on pause until you're ready to download again. And that way, it makes sure that it doesn't fill up any memory on your device unnecessarily. And there you have what podcasts are and are not. And with that, let's do a quick wrap up of this lesson. We know that podcasts are great sources of information to answer many of the questions people have about current events and the latest preparedness trends that are available pretty much to anyone, anywhere, at any time. And podcasts are defined as music or talk shows that a creator produces in digital format for automatic on-demand download over the internet. We also know that podcasts are similar to a radio show, except they're on the internet, and unlike a radio show, you can save podcast episodes and listen to them over and over again, which means you control the experience. You control the show, and you control whatever you want to do with the show whenever you want to listen to it. And finally, we know that podcasts are audio-only shows that are pre-recorded and uploaded to the internet by podcast creators like myself for podcast listeners like yourself. So now that we've covered what podcasts are, I'll see you in the next lesson